magic of the internet, the amazing Caitlin Rozakis. Caitlin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am so excited to see you again and to talk about cozy fantasy.
Me too.
I met Caitlin at Worldcon this year, and she was an absolute delight. So, of course, after knowing not only that she is an expert on cozy fantasy, I saw a great panel from her at Worldbuilding Con, and sorry, at Worldcon, and
I was like, I noticed you're sneaking something in there.
Worldbuilding Con is a con that we run every
Oh,
March.
that sounds
So
awesome.
it's very easy for me to apparently say the wrong thing and say Worldbuilding Con instead of World Con. So yeah, we met at Worldcon. And then I discovered that Caitlin is also absolutely delightful to talk to at the Titan Publishing Party. And I was like, well, Caitlin has to come and talk on the podcast. There is no escape now.
Absolutely.
So
I'm delighted to
for
be here.
for those of you listening through the magic of podcast, I am showing the little giveaway bookmark from Dreadful, which is Caitlin's book. It's bad enough waking up with a half destroyed evil wizard's workshop with no eyebrows, no memories, and no idea how long you have before the Dreadlord, whomever shows up, to murder you horribly. It's a lot worse when you realize that the Dreadlord, whoever, is you. That is the pitch for Dreadful. It is a cozy fantasy that absolutely shot to the New York bestsellers list, and Caitlin is the author here. What was it like? Because it was your debut as well, so it really like just did
It
phenomenally.
was. I feel beyond fortunate. I honestly was not expecting that. So that was a ride and a half. It continues to be. Um, I really lucked out with my publisher. The Titan team has just been incredibly supportive and really championed this book. So I mean, obviously, like I think it was a good book. I was proud of it, but a lot of it also is how much work that their team put into it and how much faith that they had in the book. So I was just immensely great, like immensely lucky, and I'm so grateful. But yeah, it's been fun. I mean, it's one of those like overnight successes don't happen overnight kinds of stuff. I mean, I've been I've been writing since middle school, and I have been submitting short stories since like 2007. And I think the first novel I wrote was in, like 2012. So there are 3 trunk novels before this, uh, and I mean, so the ones there's one that no one will ever see. We're just gonna not talk about that one. It was awful. Uh, and there were 2 that were steampunk after the steampunk wave kind of crested, and
Mm.
nobody wants them right now. So they're just getting tucked away. And eventually, maybe, I'll dust them off someday. But it's so it's like this was the debut novel, but it's not like it came out of nowhere kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
There's
there
a
was a
lot.
lot of grind before that. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I probably should introduce Caitlin properly
Oh, that
because,
would probably
of
help.
course, she is far too modest to introduce herself. So, New York Times best-selling author Caitlin Rozakis writes fantasy with a satirical twist and a cozy heart, which is, of course, why she's here to talk about cozy fantasy today. Her debut novel is Dreadful, which turned out to be not dreadful at all, very much. And her next book, The Grimoire Grammar School Parent-Teacher Association, is coming out in May 2025, also from Titan Books. Marketed by day and writer by night, Caitlin has the amazing superpower of causing lab techs to say, I've never seen it do that before. And after getting her degree in mechanical engineering from Princeton University, she has had too many career changes, including mechanical engineering, which was cut short after a murderous robot incident. If we have time, I want to ask you about that. Finance, the American Museum of Natural History, and now she specializes in tech marketing and lives in Jersey City with her husband and son. That sounds amazing. And if you want to learn more about Caitlin, you can go to caitlinrozakis.com. The link is, of course, in the description and or the chat, depending on when you are watching this. And yeah, you can find all about her books, her life, and all the short stories that she's written, and all the awesome stuff that Caitlin does and is. So I think it's high time to get started with cozy. It is absolutely the hottest genre in publishing right now. But what is cozy fantasy in a nutshell?
So I've been saying, like, I think it's less even a subgenre and more a vibe. Uh, a lot of what is going into cozy is a set of some tropes, but a lot of it just sort of a feeling. Cozy fantasy is usually relatively low stakes. Uh, it's usually concerned with a lot of the trappings of domesticity. Uh, and it's it's definitely one of those like, oh, I know it when I see it kinds of things. Uh, I think part of it's also a very limited consequences. And one of the things that I've been saying a lot with it is that it is a thing where you go into you have faith in the author that while the characters may be in some turmoil or some conflict or some jeopardy, uh, you will always feel safe. The characters will not always necessarily feel safe, but you will always feel safe. It's a sense of safety. Um, and what I mean by that is, and this is not a slam on any of the other things, but it's not going to have nail biters. It's not going to have deep hurt comfort scenes. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But it is you go into a cozy novel and you know that you're not going to be upset, that the experience of reading this thing will feel warm and fuzzy and fun. And you will not be getting hit seriously. You're not going to be tearing up and you're not going to be clutching, white knuckling your way through it.
Yeah, it's not going to be stressful. This will not be a
Exactly.
stressful read, is kind of the promise of cozy fantasy, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it kind of came the terming came out of like cozy mystery, which has been like
Mm,
cozy mysteries have been a thing for forever.
yeah,
And it's like in cozy mysteries, it's like somebody's gonna die.
yeah.
But it will be kind of a funny, unemotional death. It will be an ice cream themed novel where somebody dies by falling headfirst into the ice cream machine. And at the end of the mystery, after you find out who did it, there will be 3 recipes for ice cream.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of cozy fantasy is sort of coming out of that tradition.
Yeah, that kind of it's murder but lighthearted kind of idea. No, absolutely. So one of the easiest ways to explain something, as you said, is I know it when I see it. Let's talk examples. What are some examples of cozy fantasy from novels and from games and from TV and movies? What are your favorite examples? I think we
Uh,
have to start with your book. I
oh,
don't think I'll let you
totally.
get away with that.
No, that's fair.
So tell us a little bit about Dreadful, like the kind of two-sentence pitch. Why is it cozy?
So the basic plot for Dreadful, for those people who haven't heard it, Dreadful is a fantasy farce about an evil wizard who loses his memory and has to fake his way along with his own evil plan. Uh, he does not have a good time, but we do. Uh, and it is it definitely touches on some serious topics. It is fundamentally about the nature of evil and about redemption and toxic masculinity and moat squid. They just want to love you to death.
They're
Uh,
just very cuddly. That's where all the
they're
crushing comes
so
in.
cuddly. They just want to cuddle you really tightly with their tentacles. Uh, as for like I mean, I didn't set out with a goal of writing a cozy novel. When I started writing Dreadful, like cozy hadn't even hit yet. And that's one of the big lessons is don't try to write to market because you will not be able to. Publishing, it moves too slowly. You will not be able to keep up with sales trends. If you want to write, like, that's not saying don't write cozy, but if you want to write cozy, you should be writing cozy because you love cozy and you like being there. Uh, and not because you're specifically saying, "Oh, this thing is hot."
Yeah.
The reason why I wrote Dreadful in that tone in the first place was I had an entirely different plan for the thing I was going to be writing in that time period, and it was kind of dark and angsty, and I had a really messed up love affair, and involved like the legacy of colonialism, and it was really,
Heavy.
like, heavy, and I wrote that first page of that thing, like, 5 times
Oh
and just
goodness.
could not make any headway, and I finally realized the reason why was because this was kind of a terrible world, and I didn't wanna be there. And the thing you have to remember is when you're writing a book, like the actual writing, depending on how fast you write, that might be a year or 2 of your life, and then it'll probably be, another 6 months or a year. Again, this is all super variable of revising, and then if you're a beginner author,
Yeah.
then you're going to be pitching this thing, so you're going to be talking about it for a very long time, and then it's going to go to an editor, and it's going to get revised and to be copied. Like you're going to live in this world for like at least 5 years of your life minimum.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to be there, that's not a great place to be. So I ended up writing this because I realized that I was gravitating towards lighter, fluffier things, and I realized that if I wanted to like have this in my head rent free 24/7, I wanted it to be somewhere where I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So
That makes total sense.
it it was definitely not trying to hit the checklist. And in some ways it doesn't. In some ways it doesn't fit. But I think a lot of the stuff on the list you'll find is that, again, with it's not really a subgenre so much as a vibe.
Mm,
Uh, but ways in which it is cozy is it's very much about found family.
yeah.
Um, the There is a potentially high stakes little bit at the end, but that's not really what he's trying to do. He's spending most of his time just fumbling his way around.
Mm,
There is a harvest festival. There are a bunch of adorable goblins, one of
mm.
whom desperately, desperately wants to be a fancy chef, and she's really, really not, shall we say, experienced.
Okay, so there's a lot
Uh,
of kind of humor and satire in there that makes it feel
Absolutely.
light and cozy
It,
as well.
it's
Yeah.
it's light, it's funny. There is I mean, bad stuff happens, but it doesn't dwell in those places for very long. Uh, people do die. They're evil wizards. They're evil wizards running around, but it's fast. And that's not where the main point is. There's a lot of shenanigans, and there's a lot of farce, and there's a lot of running in and out of doors where nobody knows who's in the garlic costume.
Absolutely. I think, for examples, one of the very common ones that probably people do know is Legends and Lattes. Like
Yeah.
that is
That's the
one
one
of
that
the ones that
kicked
really
off the
kicked off the movement.
trend. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's been stuff that would fit in the cozy thing for a very long time. I mean, like Howl's Moving Castle is a classic of the genre, and that is absolutely it's so cozy.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
that was written well before anyone even had the inkling of coziness. So like it's not like this is a newly invented thing. It's a marketing category, which and I work in marketing. I don't think there's anything wrong with marketing categories. Marketing categories are great for I am looking for this thing. Help me find more of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Funnily enough, I literally just have all of Studio Ghibli written here, more or
Oh yeah.
less. It
Oh,
Studio Ghibli is so cozy fantasy
except for
vibes.
the fireflies. We're gonna
Oh yeah, yeah. Except for like some of the scary dark. I would say
yeah,
Princess Mononoke also not super
yeah, a
cozy.
little, that one's
Right?
less cozy.
Horror, scary. Yeah. Okay. So Howl's Moving Castle for sure. Ariati definitely. I would say. Kiki's Delivery Service. I think
Oh
very
yes, Kiki's
cozy.
Kiki's delivery service is again, like, it's so low stakes. I mean, Kiki's delivery service is about getting over burnout,
Mm,
uh, which I like. If you haven't revisited that recently, I feel like that's a thing that quite a lot of us need that particular reminder again.
yes, absolutely. In terms of video games, Stardew Valley was such a big one. That spawned Coral Island, which is very much the same vibe. Animal Crossing, which has been going
Animal
for years.
Crossing has got to be a classic there.
So cozy. It's your animals, you're growing things. You have a farm, you building relationships. This is like cozy 101. So if you're trying to figure out what is the cozy vibe, they are absolute kind of touchstones for me. How about novels for you? Obviously, we've talked about
Yeah.
Dreadful. It's wonderful. What other novels for you
Um,
really hit that cozy niche?
I loved Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T.
Mm,
Kingfisher. Again with the baking, and again, like there's some threads of darkness in there, but it is fundamentally a very positive and warm place to be. House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. And I have not read the follow-up, which just came out. I am on the wait list at my library. Let's see, what else? The Monk and Robot series. By
Yes,
Beverage
it's a very
Chamber.
different kind of
Very,
cozy.
like, that's a very calm and meditative kind
Yeah,
of thing. Uh, it's peaceful. It's a
yeah,
very soothing place to inhabit for a while.
yeah.
Uh, let's see, in terms of like sort of more science fiction-y, I love Divinity 36 by Gail Carriger. It's
Yes.
K-pop in space, super queer, really found family emphasis. Um,
And I would actually say that her Parasol Protectorate series, her Solar series, those are also very cozy vibes.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I can keep going for a while. So the question is, how many do you want?
I think we have a good picture there in terms of RPGs. Second Samurai has said Koriko, a magical year solo RPG, is a great version of Kiki's delivery service for tabletop RPGs. I think it was this year we had the author of Apothecaria on here, which is it's a solo journaling RPG where you're playing a hedge witch that goes around and gathers potion ingredients to heal people. And it's about, again, building families. You're living in a little village. You're living your best cozy witch life. Anna Blackwell, that's the author. So that's another, and if you're into RPGs, there's a lot of solo cozy RPGs, and those are the ones that I would steer you to. So yeah, there's a lot of media. Okay, so I usually I say common tropes, but there's so many areas I wanted to cover with cozy that I have broken that down into theme and setting, character traits, tropes, as separate things. So let's start with theme and setting, because I feel like this is so important in cozy. Like, obviously it's important always, but in cozy, this is a real defining factor as far as I think.
Uh, I mean, I think one of the ones at this point that has become it's gone from trope into almost cliche is the
Mm.
small business kind of thing. So, I mean, like
Yes.
in Legends and Lattes, uh, she is trying to set up a coffee shop. There's ones that there's a lot of caffeine, like a lot of caffeine, a lot of coffee shops, tea shops, that kind of stuff. The spell shop, it's technically a spell shop, but it's covered as by a jam shop. Um,
Mm.
I am forgetting the name of the prequel to Legends and Lattes, but that was a bookshop.
Oh,
There's
bookshops and bone dust. Yeah.
Bone Dust, yes. There's a lot of these are about, interestingly enough, a lot of them are about small businesses, about starting your own small business. And I think there's a lot of, I mean, one of the questions that comes up on panels about this a lot is like, why this? Why now? And I mean, I don't think it's a whole secret to most of us that it's been a really stressful decade. There's a lot going on that has been very unpleasant, and while it's never okay to stick your head in the sand completely, the needing a respite it's a thing I think we all need. You need a way to recharge, you need somewhere safe to go. And in our current capitalist hellscape, the fantasy of running your own small business is, I think, something a lot of us think about and dream about.
Yeah.
The nice thing about fantasy is that you don't have to deal with health inspectors and taxation issues and labor law and all of the other fun things that come with small businesses, which in the real world are very high percentage of failure and, eating up all your life savings and everything. But being able to, go dream about, hey, I'm going to open this adorable little bakery, and that does not involve the having to get up at 3 a.m. And then have some Karen scream at you because she wanted chocolate, and cinnamon rolls don't come in chocolate; it's cinnamon.
Yeah.
Sorry. Uh,
Yeah.
it seems like a soothing place to be.
Yeah. I have another theory about this. I definitely agree. It's that escapist oasis. It's that, vision of, I starting a small business is a dream for a lot of people. But I also think that that's tied to another big common cozy fantasy theme, which is community and found family.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that small business, it's like it takes a village to start a small business. Legends and Lattes, very minor spoilers for the book. She finds a property, but she can't build it by herself. She doesn't have the expertise. She needs help. That help becomes reciprocity. She ends up with a baker. That help becomes another relationship in her life. And it's all about building these relationships. And so the business becomes a vehicle by which people come into her life. It becomes a vehicle and of community, a center of community in many ways.
Yeah, that it takes the community to help build this thing, and then from there, it turns into becoming an engine for the community. I mean, I think
Absolutely,
it's
yeah.
a thing that a lot of us feel are lacking, and in our current society, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of us would like to have
Yeah.
more of that sense of community.
Yeah. And I mean, that feeling of connection as well. Like when you go to the supermarket, you go through the automated checkout and you don't need to talk to anyone, and it's all very convenient and sanitary, but it's also very distancing and
It
alienating.
is.
And that feeling of like, oh, I'm going to go to the bakery and just chat for a minute with such and such because it's a cozy novel and there isn't a queue and I don't have to be at work in 5 minutes. That's a fantasy in itself these days.
It is, which is a little sad, but
A little sad. But yeah, I mean, I feel that's part of the reason for that. I think the other reason is that a lot of cozy is about identity, was another massive theme. And that kind of like I am reinventing myself as a small business owner. So Stardew Valley is typical. Stardew Valley, you start as a corporate shill
Mhm.
and then you go become a farmer in a magical place. And it's literally like you shed the skin of being a corporate shill and become the thing you always wanted to be, in a way. I don't know if that's something
It's
that
yeah, no, I
you
mean,
recognize as cozy,
I
but
I
for
think
me,
very
that's
much
very
so. I
part of
mean,
it.
going back to our classic Legends and Lattes here is, like, she's been an adventurer, she spent all of her time fighting,
Yeah,
and she wants to do something that is creative instead of destructive.
yeah,
Uh, I mean, that's one of the ways in which Dreadful does fit a lot of the cozy archetypes, is that Gav is realizing, he was an evil wizard, he's done a whole bunch of terrible things, and he's very alone as a
yeah.
result. And he's got a whole bunch of really uncomfortable furniture that he needs to keep his image up as being sufficiently evil. Uh, there's a lot about home decor and fashion, uh, and and branding of, like, what do you do so that you have the impact that you're looking to achieve, and then realizing that also that you become the things you do, and
Mm,
people treat you the way that you present yourself, uh, and realizing that that's a cycle that you don't necessarily want to be in, and maybe you want to be in a totally different cycle.
yeah. No, absolutely. I feel I have accidentally led us into my next question, which is character traits for cozy fantasy. Um, I think my biggest observation personally here is that the protagonists tend to be older. They tend to have lived some life. These are not 18-year-old farm boys, right?
I think some of it is you don't appreciate a comfy chair, until your back is starting to get crankier. Um, I'm in my early 40s, and I'm definitely feeling much more the why the like, when you're young, like, really, like, fresh, you're full of energy, and you're ready to sleep on the floor, and you're ready to, go throw yourself at the world, uh, and and you're also you want the big stakes, and you want to change the world, and you want all these big things. And I think one of the things that is very common with cozy protagonists is it is somebody who is disillusioned, and isolated. And it
Yes,
is
at the beginning.
about yeah, at the beginning, and it is about them looking for ways to, and they don't always know that that's not what they want. Like, a lot of times they start off thinking that that's fine, and that's just the way it is, and kind of by accident, they have a small goal that sort of snowballs on them, and they get involved kind of against their own will in other people and in their community. So, like, in the spell shop, she is a very misanthropic librarian who does not want to have anything to do with people, but she needs a way to eat, and the only way she can come up with, like, the whole long setup, but she is to start this jam shop. But she needs help to do the jam shop, and she has to let the annoying neighbor help her, and then she has to let the annoying baker help her, and she starts realizing these people aren't actually so annoying, and slowly, even though she didn't want to interact with her community, she becomes part of the community. Uh, and I had another example I was going to go with, and I've lost it. But that's a pretty common thing in a lot of these, is somebody who starts off not part of the community, who
Yeah.
slowly learns to value the
Yes.
slowing down, learns to value the small pleasures of life. They may have been ambitious. They're learning to value the slower, like the slower life in general. They may just be battered down by their former ambitions, by the world. And they're kind of coming back and rediscovering. And you sort of need a little bit of life experience to want that, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's something that I don't know if I fully appreciated when I was like, 18, and appreciate a lot more these days. You
Mhm.
start understanding how rare a really good cinnamon roll is,
Yeah. Yeah.
and also
Absolutely.
how you start appreciating better how much work a community is. Uh,
Yes.
that's a thing I realized, like, as a parent, uh, Christmas is only magical because mom and dad work their tails off to make it magical. But
Absolutely.
there
We were talking about
is,
kids' parties, and I think
yeah,
they're exactly the same, you know?
but there is a like I still find Christmas magical, even though I'm the one making most of the magic, because it is the making of the magic that's magical.
Yeah.
And that's a perspective that I think starts to come with maturity, of that it isn't just about somebody, about, this stuff magically happens. It's actually, you appreciate it more for having had to do the work to go pick the berries from the woods to make your jam, that you appreciate these things more when you've had to do the domestic labor to get them.
Yeah, absolutely. You appreciate the journey as well as the product, essentially. I
Exactly.
think healing narratives are also very popular.
Very
Like
much.
that's one of the things that I've seen, characters recovering from trauma, characters physically healing or mentally healing, or sometimes a bit of both. Bookshops and Bone Dust has this a physical healing narrative, but there's a lot of kind of emotional trauma recovery and these kinds of things. And it tends to be dealt with lightly and
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
very
not,
gently for the most part.
yeah, it's not like all like dwelling on the agony, and it's not a lot of, like, there's usually not a lot of explicit blood and gore and guts and stuff. But it's a kind of a little bit more on the emotional distance that these things create between you and your community.
Yeah.
Uh, oh, someone you can build a nest in was the other one that I was going to say.
Oh, nice.
Like,
Yeah.
she is a horrifying goo monster who can only walk around by stealing other people's skeletons. And she falls in love.
Mm.
Aww. And her idea of loving is initially somebody that she can lay her eggs in their chest cavity and have them chew their way out. It's so romantic.
I remember you mentioning this at Worldcon. I remember thinking, how on earth can this be cozy? I
It
must find
shouldn't,
out. And
but
I'm
it
so glad that you
is.
reminded it's going on a post-it. It's
Yeah,
happening.
it's cozy horror. Like, it really should be disgusting and horrifying, and somehow John Wiswell makes it wholesome.
Amazing. I have a friend who wrote Cozy Eldritch, and it
Baby
works.
Cthulhu.
It is so good. It is wonderful. It's full of apple pies and wonder, and it's about somebody living in a canal boat house in that goes through universes because everything's been destroyed. But this is the last little pocket of cozy in the world. It works. Cozy can be applied to a lot of different things and work, weirdly. So yeah, I trust you. It's on a post-it. It's happening. Okay, so we've discussed themes and setting, we've discussed character traits, but there is a grab bag of other, common tropes. You don't always see them, but you often see them, and
Caffeine.
features. Caffeine. I think cozy hot drinks. It's
Yes,
anything that makes it feel
absolutely.
cozy, right? Like I'm sitting here with my strawberry and vanilla tea. It seemed very appropriate for the cozy
Oh,
fantasy.
I've got cinnamon.
Oh yeah. And those are often there's a lot of food and drink, and the food and drink is apple pies and it's cinnamon tea and it's,
Yeah,
that's
it's not super structured, haute cuisine, and I mean,
no.
don't get me wrong. Like I love a overly elaborate tasting menu, but it's like this is so when we went to Worldcon, my one of the things that my son who was with me wanted to do was he wanted to do afternoon tea because we were in the UK. Um, and I was like, okay, great. Do you want fancy afternoon tea or do you want cozy afternoon tea? Because those are very different experiences. And I mean, I love a good fancy afternoon tea with all the perfectly matched, everything is matchy matchy, and all the very carefully, delicately constructed like petit fours and everything. Uh, but it is a very different feeling than a cozy afternoon tea where it's all mismatched china and it's sort of more the homespun
Mm,
types of pastries and everything. And he
yeah.
was definitely like, cozy. I don't want to be fancy. I want cozy. I'm like, okay, we can do it. But it's there there's lots of wonderful things in the world, but cozy specifically is focusing more on the not formal, on the comfortable, on the homespun, uh, that kind of aspect.
It's much less rare steak and it like a rare bloody giant piece of meat on a plate, and it's much more, a cinnamon roll or, a
Yes,
cozy stew or something
yes.
like it's
And it's
very
not
much
gonna be like
that homey
traveler
vibe.
stew, it's not like "Oh, we had to cook this around the fire" stew so much
No.
as like, "Oh, it's chicken with, like, little dumplings in it."
Yeah, anything that like your mom made you when you were sick,
Mhm.
anything that feels homey, that's what tends to crop up in terms of food and
Yep.
drink. The other one is
Books
pets,
and pets.
right?
Like, you need something that's adorable.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's again, it's that feeling of cozy. It's that feeling of, something that is domestic. As you said
And
right at the
you can
beginning.
rip on it. I mean, like, someone you can build a nest in. The pet, it's a bear. It's a blue bear. She eats people's faces, but she's so sweet, and nobody better hurt her. She has never done a bad thing in her life. She's the best bear.
And that's the thing, like it has to fit everything else. And that makes total sense for this horror show of a cozy thing. I'm so curious. But yeah, what are some other tropes and features, apart from, cozy food and pets, do you think?
Let's see. We talked about found family.
Yeah.
Uh, let's see what else. I'm like going through like we talked about small businesses. We
Yeah.
talked about domesticity.
I
Um,
think non-spicy romance is very common.
yes, yeah. I mean, like it's if you're they don't have to have romance. They very often do, but yeah, it's gonna be closed door usually.
Yeah.
Uh, it's this isn't and it's not going to be deeply passionate kinds of like it'll be it's a hearth fire. It is not a blazing building. Like crockery is not going to get knocked off the wall here.
No, no. This is not, as you say, it's never spicy. It doesn't tend to be a whirlwind romance. It tends to be an adorable, slow burn, friends first kind of. Oh gosh, could there possibly be something more? Often it's tied to the healing narrative. Often it's tied to the kind of finding your new
Self
place in the
finding
world
your trust,
narrative.
yeah,
Yeah,
rebuilding that community, uh,
yeah,
and it will be not a star-crossed lovers. It will be a domestic partnership kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
thing.
So, again, a very small spoiler. Well, a somewhat spoiler for Legends and Lattes. Shut your ears if you don't want to know. The partnership ends up becoming a romance, and it's a very sweet romance. And as Caitlin said, no crockery is ever knocked off the wall. It's a very sweet partnership that becomes a friendship that becomes something warmer, and it really is part of that kind of acceptance. LGBTQ is also very common in
Very
cozy
like
fantasy.
a lot of there's a lot of queerness
Yeah,
in this. I think it's a combination of uh there's a lot of drama and heartbreak involved in the LGBTQ community right
yeah,
now. And whether you are part of that community or just a decent human being who cares about other people, there's both the wanting a respite from the real world and all of its horror, um, and also wanting that wish fulfillment and wanting that representation of like, here are happy stories about the queer community,
yeah.
and also like I think the queer community more than any other subgroup is so much about found family. A lot
Yes,
of times because
absolutely.
people have gotten cut off from parts of their family of origin because they were jerks. Uh, and so it's a natural part of a lot of queer communities is this big emphasis on the found family.
Yeah.
And that really plays into a lot of the cozy tropes of finding your people, even if they might not have been, they don't necessarily look exactly like you and they don't necessarily act exactly like you, the discovering the things you have in common with them and building something together, and realizing that you can find people who are ride or die and will support you, even if you're not related by blood.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also ties into that the healing narratives and the identity, like everything that we've said, it makes a lot of sense that that's often part of it as well. Not always, but often. Um, so we mentioned stakes, we mentioned managing stakes. It's a big part of what separates cozy from epic fantasy, you know.
Absolutely.
Um, how do you manage stakes in a cozy fantasy story?
So this is a delicate balance that you
Mm,
need to have because, and I've read one or two things that were so low stakes as to be basically no stakes. And I mean, personally, that one is not for me. And I recognize that it is a thing that some people want and need. Uh, I do want some kind of tension.
yeah,
Uh, so if I think that is if you choose to go with the no stakes route, you need to be extremely aware of what you're doing, and make that honestly, that needs to be one of the biggest parts of your marketing of that book because it's the kind of thing that if somebody is looking for that, then they will love this thing so hard. And unless they are explicitly looking for that, they are going to be extremely frustrated by the end and probably not finish.
yeah.
So you want, again, putting
You
on my
want it
marketing,
on the pin. You want it
yeah, like
very clear who will love this book.
exactly. Um, but you also don't want high stakes. As we said at the beginning, like this is an epic fantasy. This is not thriller. There should not be white knuckling here. Uh, there, your reader is going to be very confident that everything's going to come out happy, and they're also going to be reasonably confident that you're not going to have a total gut punch followed by happy. I mean, there's
Yeah,
plenty of going with like the romance genre. There are expectations built into romance,
yeah,
but there's also different levels of how big that arc is going to be with the
yeah,
climax. There's going to be a dark night of the soul, but it could be just sort of a cloudy afternoon of the soul.
yeah,
Uh, and it so generally with cozy, as I said at the beginning, you don't have to have the characters be safe all the time, but you want the reader to feel safe. The reader is not waiting to for something horrible to happen. And if you promise coziness and then you murder a pet, or you have the lead couple break up in a way that is just devastating and the your reader is going to be like sobbing, uh, they're going to feel betrayed
yeah,
because you spent three-quarters of the book talking about tea sets, and now somebody is absolutely convinced that the love of their life has died horribly, and they're holding a severed hand that they think
yeah.
belongs to their lover.
It's that tone whiplash thing. It doesn't
Yeah.
work well. Yeah,
So you need to you need to know what effect you're trying to create, and you need to promise something and then deliver on it. Uh,
yeah,
and I'm again not saying that there is no place for pulling the rug out from under a reader,
yeah,
but you need to have dropped enough hints. If you're going to do something horrifying, you cannot promise one thing and then deliver a different experience. They will be very angry and not in a good way.
yeah, absolutely. I think we didn't mention it in common tropes and features. Happily ever after, very common trope and
Oh,
feature. It is very
yes.
rare that there is not a happily ever after. I cannot think of an example um, of a not happy ever after, or at
At
least not
least
happy for
happy for
now.
now. They have to be at least happy for now. But it has to be this can't be that big a climax, and they do need to end in a happy place. And it
Yeah,
doesn't have to be the happy place necessarily that they thought they wanted.
Yeah.
That's okay. I mean, vague posting for spoilers here. Gav very much does not end up in the place where he thinks he was going to go, and it is not where he wanted to be for most of the book. But he is satisfied
Yeah.
in the end, and it's like it's almost more important for him that not being perfectly happy is less important than being satisfied,
Yeah.
and feeling like what he is doing is worthwhile. And
Yeah.
that is important to him. And he doesn't know how important that is to him until he has the ability to have it.
Yeah. For me, I think one of the most important thing about stakes in cozy fantasy is okay, in epic fantasy, it's fate of the country, fate of the world, fate of the universe. Fine. In cozy fantasy, it is all tied to the main character. It is
And there's
so
community.
personal to the main character, personal to the community. And that's why it's compelling. That's what makes it important. Like, yes, okay, if this coffee shop fails, it's not the end of the world, but it's sure gonna suck for Liv. Viv, this was her last chance. This was what she wanted. She's poured her heart and her soul and her savings into this thing. So for her, it kind of feels like the end of the world if this doesn't succeed. And that's where the stakes become high but personal rather than world ending, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes the stakes feel cozy to me. It's that very
And
personal thing.
having that sense of scale is part of what allows you to do this domesticity. It's like if you're going to do epic fantasy, uh, all of it is big. All of the emotions are big. All of the training montage is going to be, climbing over the walls and learning to sword fight or sling fireballs. The arc is going to be big. The Dark Night of the Soul is going to be shattering. Probably several people, including your mentor, are going to die horribly. The Kai is going to be this massive battle that would have to be done with CGI. Uh, and then the happy ending is going to be the saving of everything. In Cozy, it's all small. It lets you zoom in on the little details. And you can spend a big chunk of time talking about your tea sets and talking about your books and talking about how you're rolling out the scone, because the whole thing is going to stay down there. It's going to stay at the same level. I mean, it's like when you zoom way in or way out on a picture. This is going to stay at the same zoom level. You kind of have to stay there. So
Yeah.
it's going to be relatively. It's also probably not going to have globe trotting
No.
involved.
Not a lot of
You may,
travel.
yeah, you may start in one location and early on in the book move to the second location that's going to be where you stay. Like a lot of times it is about like having been out in the big wide world and then coming into a much smaller location, but you're going to stay in the same setting for the vast majority of your book, and you're going to choose to stay there at the end too. It's not going to be and I think that's where it's different from like the Hollywood archetypes of, the big city person comes to the small town to learn a thing and then go back to the big city.
Yeah.
And I say this is a big city person who has no intention of living in a small town. uh, but it's a different type of story,
Yeah.
because
No,
it is not
absolutely.
about learning a very special lesson and then going out into the wide world. It is about choosing to focus on the here and now.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh so again, this is not about shade, this is about learning. What are some common mistakes or things that can go wrong with cozy fantasy? If I we
Yeah.
have a whole 3 million world builders and writers and game creators who want to create cozy fantasy. Like they want to create interesting new things, they want to try things. How can we steer them right so they don't make the same mistakes that we may have made or have seen in the past?
Well, I mean, some of the things we just talked about of the either zooming in too far or too close or too far, of making these stakes so low that it doesn't actually matter and like nothing happens, or making the stakes high enough that it stops being cozy. Uh, One of the danger failure modes I see is Tradwife, if that
Mm,
makes sense. There is It should definitely involve the importance of domesticity, which is traditionally not really celebrated in fantasy,
Yeah.
uh, but not to the creepy fetishization extent that you see on like Tradwife TikTok. Uh, that ideally you need to continue to acknowledge the existence of labor,
Yeah.
uh, of that going the super traditional way. There's a reason why we stopped doing the super traditional way of lots of stuff. There's a big difference between like I'm going to, make my own biscuits and I am going to make my own cereal.
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Like grow my own freaking wheat.
yes. But
Yes.
there is a lot of historical baggage that goes with this stuff, and please think about it as you're writing this. You don't have to turn this into a screed on feminism. You don't have to turn this into a screed on the many ways in which people of color have gotten the short end of the stick in a lot of this. But please don't be completely oblivious.
Yeah.
And have in the back of your head that you do not continue to perpetuate harm
Yes.
of automatically assuming a number of things of remember that the fortunes of most of Jane Austen's heroines would have been on the slave trade in the Caribbean. There's a reason why those people could afford to do nothing but walk around and take little turns around the parlor is because their money came from somewhere, and that somewhere was exploitative. Uh, you don't have to go into the details of where your coffee, tea, and chocolate come from, but please keep in mind that because again, you're in a fantasy world, and one of the joys of fantasy world is you can come up with ways for us to have gotten some of these resources without the actual historical exploitative nature. But coffee, tea, and chocolate all come from parts of the world that are not where a lot of cozy is currently set in a very westernized, like English countryside cottage kind of thing. And I love cottagecore too. Like it's delightful, it's beautiful. Uh, but also keep in mind that that is not the only place where one can find comfort. There's actually a lot of interesting work that's also being done in non-Western style cozy. Uh, the Tales and Feathers magazine is a great place to find short cozy. With a lot, they do a lot of work in non-Western cozy
Mm.
because it doesn't have to all be scones. Other people's moms made them dumplings. Other people's childhoods. You can still have that that domesticity. You can have the low stakes. You can have that in places other than a stone cottage with an English style garden. Uh, and you don't have to do anything, but it's more of a don't let this narrow down so far that there's only one mode of comfort. And remember that we have a big wide world full of people with rich traditions who are also have wonderfully delicious food and wonderful family and communities that are bonding. For that matter, seek out some of that. It's worth looking for.
Yeah. Moonlight Bard says, cozy bowl of pho or a cup of mate?
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Absolutely. Why not green tea? Why not?
Yes,
No, I love that. And again, like our view has become, cozy equals cottagecore, but you're quite right. Like a thousand different kinds of cozy. And if you have a wild, weird fantasy world, I bet you can have a cozy corner in there that is unlike anything we've
absolutely.
ever seen. And I want to see that.
Yeah, and especially as people get kind of tired of the retreads of the same tropes, they're from a just from a saleability perspective,
Yeah.
not doing a clone, not doing cookie cutter. Sorry
Ah,
for the terrible pun there.
it was great. I loved it.
Not like at this point, we're a couple years into cozy,
Hmm.
and a lot of the obvious things have been done. And there's going to probably be like with every other thing, we went through the vampire fiction phase, and then no one wanted to buy vampire fiction. We went through the steampunk phase, and then no one wanted to buy steampunk. Um, Looking for ways to make yours different, and not just in the my werewolves are different because their fur is purple kinds of ways, but actually like thinking through what are implications, what are other spins, what are other ways in which you can achieve the same emotional impact, because I think we're always going to want stuff with that emotional impact, especially now that we are aware that people want that. People are going to keep wanting it. But there's only so many coffee shops that people are going to watch somebody else open. So look for some other, like there's so much potential here.
Yeah.
Keep it as tropes and not cliches.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say do something that's personal to you. Like, I don't know about you guys, I enjoyed Legends and Lattes, but I don't personally find coffee shops very cozy. That not like that doesn't work for me. I enjoyed the books. I totally understood the vibe they were painting, but there are things that to me are more cozy and other ideas that are more personal to me. And I'm sure you have the same thing. Like, what's the book you should be writing? What's cozy for you? Because that's going to vibe with somebody. And it's not necessarily a coffee shop. I want to talk about slice of life because
Yes.
slice of life is a big old part of cozy fantasy and it's great, but there is a chance that you can just end up watching a character cook a recipe in a kitchen in a cozy fantasy book,
And then you've got a
then
recipe site.
and then you have a recipe site, not a cozy fantasy novel. Now, Caitlin, you were talking about how every scene should do multiple things. I want you to do that rant again
Ah, yes. Yeah,
for the
we had
podcast.
we had a rant
Yeah, we did.
before we started. So this is just a general rule for writing, and it doesn't matter whether it's cozy or not. But every scene that you have needs to do at least two things, ideally several things. And not necessarily like signposted. You know, you should like the reader shouldn't be making a checklist of like which plot line did this scene advance, but you definitely should like ideally every time you sit down to write a scene, it should be furthering the plot and also this character arc at least, or it's going to move the romance plot along, but it will also drop this hint that is going to allow later on we're going to pick up in the plot. They need to be doing multiple things. So if you have a scene where the only thing it's going to do is this loving description of someone rolling out their pie crust, and it's so soothing, and that's it. That's all that happens is they roll out a pie crust, and it's like it doesn't actually change. Nothing changes from the beginning to the end besides a pie crust. You're going to lose your readers, and it's like again, like at that point you are just writing SEO clickbait for your recipe site.
Yes.
It needs to do a thing. They may be thinking while they roll out the pie crust. The process of rolling out the pie crust may clarify something for them. It may show character development in that they roll out a pie crust in a previous scene and now they're rolling out the pie crust now, and it's different. They may be talking to somebody while they roll out the pie crust. They may try to roll out the pie crust and fail in some way that's going to move something, but there needs to be stuff that's happening besides just a loving description of rolling out this pie crust. And it's every feast, and I mean, like I love Redwall and the description of the feasts in all of the Redwall books. But the Redwall books, all like it usually wasn't just a description of the feast. It was usually setting the stage for something. Either it was setting up a tone. Like in the beginning of the very first Redwall book, there's a whole description of the feast. It's like 2 pages long worth of feast. And I love it. It's the best. But it's also setting up the contrast between the domestic happiness and stability of this monastery, and immediately after come the rats on their hay truck where they're coming to go murder everything in their and so it's not just about giving us a description of all the foods, but it's also letting you know, like it's setting a scene and giving us a lot of information about what this monastery can produce, what kind of level of living they are accustomed to, what they value, and then having the very strong contrast against the mercenary rat army that's coming to menace the monastery.
Yeah.
So it's serving a purpose. So you always want to make sure that your writing is serving at least one, hopefully multiple purposes.
Absolutely. And yeah, don't neglect your slice of life, but just make sure that you're weaving other things in there so you just as Caitlin said, you don't just end up writing a recipe. Don't get too gory. We touched on it, but I just want to say, like, there may be battles, there may be something. It can happen. No spoilers, but Bookshops and Bone Dust goes a little bit harder on the stakes because it's a prequel. We know that Viv is going to be fine because she turns up in the other book, which we probably already read because it came out first. So there is that feeling that even though the stakes are a little bit higher, no spoilers there, we know she's going to be fine because we've seen her in the future. So even there, it doesn't get too gory. It doesn't get too stakes are high. And I would say if you have read Bookshops and Bone Dust, that's about as high as the stakes should ever really go in cozy fantasy. Like it there are some battles, things happen. It goes quite far. Like when I was reading it, I was like, is this still cozy? Is it? And I think it is.
I mean, almost the thing is, almost all of the major cozy books have at least one or two elements of edge in them that make people start saying, is this cozy? The ones that don't at all are kind of boring.
Yeah. It needs something, huh?
They need something. And I mean, we've listed a whole lot here. And I think, and that's also part of why I say, like, it's not a subgenre, it's more of a vibe, in that it is really, some of them are really hard to decide whether or not they count. And almost every book that we've listed, and I've been on basically this panel at several different cons, and there's always, we could keep going. But there's almost always, for every one book, there'll be somebody who's like, that's not, like, I object because of blah, 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 blah. And then they'll have their own list, and somebody else will be like, I object because of blah, 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 blah. Like, it's a hard thing to define, it turns out. So I wouldn't, don't let it stop you. But it definitely is a matter of try to tip off your reader early what the worst it's going to get is. Like, don't, like, with Viv, she is a adventurer barbarian orc who it has weapons. It is not like, she's a dormouse who then has that level of fighting at the climax, because we know from the beginning that violence is a possibility. She doesn't want to choose it. We don't want her to have to choose it, but it's not jarring when it happens, because we already have sort of been tipped off that that is a vague possibility we're trying to avoid, as opposed to epic fantasy where you're trying to get there. Like, it's promised you're going to have this. The characters and the reader are both going to be disappointed if this battle doesn't happen.
Where is my stabbing? They will ask.
Yes, Viv doesn't want the stabbing to happen, and we don't want it to happen for her. But if it has to happen, we know that she is capable of it, and so it's on the table. And you want to make sure in the first couple chapters that you give just enough of a hint so that your reader doesn't feel betrayed.
Absolutely.
Because surprising your reader is a wonderful thing. Betraying your reader will have them rant about you and tell everybody never to read you, and they will never read another thing you write. So
that would be very sad. We don't want that.
That would be very sad.
I have a question that I think is a relatively quick one to answer, which is good because we're running out of time. How long should a cozy fantasy novel be if you're aiming for trad pub?
I would aim for somewhere in the 80 to 100K words, no more than that. My next novel, we just finished with copy edits, and one of the things in the developmental stage, there was a couple things that my editor wanted to add in, and we were really careful because we were trying to keep it not from going above 97. Because remember, this is a small work. It's a deliberately, it not as an insignificant. It's significant to the characters, but it is about being very zoomed in. It should not be a door stopper. Nobody needs to have a Game of Thrones or Brandon Sanderson sized book about pie crust. None of us want this. You can have 3. That could work. But it needs to be enough to count as a novel, not a novella, because you start having issues with printing. People are printing more novellas lately, but usually only from existing established authors. The way that the economies of scale on paper costs work means that most publishers do not want to physically print novellas because it's really hard to make your money back on them. So they're not going to do a debut novella.
Yeah.
So it needs to be enough to not be a novella. It needs to be formally a novel, but it needs to be a lightweight novel.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole bucket says, I am so happy to have found you. I have subbed and I'm happy to be here. We're happy to have you here too, whole bucket. May I say, some very cozy vibes there, very appropriate for our
Yes.
cozy fantasy talk. Well, that's about all we have time for. Caitlin, I want to thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. You have just been an absolute delight.
Thank you for having me. And just a tip of, if you liked Dreadful and you want to hear more about those characters, anyone who subscribes to my newsletter automatically gets a free short story about Orla and the Mayor.
There we go. So if you go to CaitlinRozakis.com, you can find the very fine New York Times bestselling cozy fantasy novel, Dreadful. If you're thinking of writing something cozy, go and read it. You need comps. This is a great one. Obviously, Caitlin knows what she's talking about. She has just informed and inspired you for an hour about the wonders of cozy fantasy. So do go check it out. And I am imagining we can sign up for your newsletter there as well, Caitlin.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, folks, that is that for this interview, but we are going on a raid. We are raiding our YouTube channel. Yes, we have a premiere going live today in a few minutes. So come and join us over on the YouTube where you can come learn all about OSR RPGs. It'll be a good time. I'll be there in the chat as well. So you can just keep the party going there with us. Caitlin, thank you so very much. Everyone in the chat, thank you so very much. As always, you know what to do. Grab your hammer and go world build. Bye, everyone. See you soon.